I can't find myself. I get lost inside my brain. Think I might need help, but I pushed all them away. I took the cards they dealt, and there's nothing I can change. So when I'm by myself, I just pray for brighter days. Sometimes I sit and I reminisce about the good times. Wish I could get those back. I keep on running these races that go in my mind, and they go on these tracks. I'm not ready to erase all my memories. I fight depression and I let it get the best of me. Now there's nowhere to run, nowhere to go. Look around, there's liquor bottles all on the floor, filling up the space inside my heart and my home, drowning out these thoughts until they leave me alone. I can't find myself. I get lost inside my brain. Think I might need help, but I pushed all them away. I took the cards they dealt, and there's nothing I can change. So when I'm by myself, I just pray for brighter days. These thoughts are draining all my energy. I try to tell them to God, they said I'm going insane, and then they recommended therapy. And I go and talk to a man who's getting paid to explain. He started saying that the chemical imbalance is the reason that my brain ain't connecting to accomplishments associated with moving on in life and past the things that my heart cannot contain. So the happiness won't sustain. And he read me my options. He said, here goes a pill, only take 2 to eat a meal, and it'll numb how I feel. I can't find myself. I get lost inside my brain. Think I might need help, but I pushed all them away. I took the cards they dealt, and there's nothing I can change. So when I'm by myself, I just pray for brighter days. Should I drown all these thoughts or should I leave them to float? I've got all of my flaws living inside of this boat. I've been anchored in pain, the weight is making me choke. It's getting harder to breathe, it's pulling right at my throat. I've been hoping for change but don't know how to restart. They say you ain't a man when you exposing your heart. Then they say you insane until it tears you apart. And then they cut you so deep and they can tell by the scars. We can only see change when we accept who we are. Try to run from the shame and you won't never get far. Don't you bottle the pain and live your life in the dark. You're meant to break from those chains and shine as bright as a star. Don't you ever tell yourself that your depression is the reason you won't make it, or that happiness is not in your cards. With all God, you can beat all the odds. Keep your faith and you'll never be lost. And say, I can't find myself. I get lost inside my brain. Think I might need help, but I pushed all them away. I took the cards they dealt, and there's nothing I can change. So when I'm by myself, I just pray for brighter days.
I am Director Chiesa, architect of the Aegis Station. Standing beside me, not as a rival, but as my essential counterpart in this analysis, is Specialist Ebba Nielsen. Welcome, initiates. We are here to dismantle the archaic perception of bipolar disorder. For too long, you have been told it is a fluctuation of moods, a pendulum swinging between happy and sad. This is a rudimentary and dangerous oversimplification. Bipolar disorder is not an emotional reaction. It is a structural instability of the self, a corruption of the genesis flow that dictates how reality is perceived, and the foundation flow that dictates how the body moves through time. In the labyrinth, we do not describe feelings. We manifest physics. We do not talk about sadness. We simulate the crushing gravity that liquefies the floor. We do not talk about mania. We render the friction of the world to zero until you are moving so fast you disintegrate. Ebba and I will guide you through the bipolar flow. I will provide the structural integrity, the fact. Ebba will provide the sensory texture, the truth. Initiating simulation, the labyrinth of the bipolar flow. Act 1, the Voltaic Ascent, the manic manifestation. Chiesa. We begin in Sector 1, the Defiance flow. Accessing the strategic analysis and narrative architecture protocols. Clinically, a manic episode is defined by a distinct period of abnormally elevated, expansive, or irritable mood, lasting at least 1 week. But mechanically, this is a hyperacceleration of thought and the erosion of inhibitory firewalls. The brain's dopamine production floods the synaptic clefts, amplifying the genesis flow, the energy of pattern recognition, to critical levels. In this state, the subject experiences hyperagency. The internal motor is relentless. The capacity to stop or listen is not just ignored, it is structurally deleted from the code. EBA. Look at the environment, initiates. The air here isn't just clear, it's vibrating. The colors of the walls are bleeding into one another because your eyes are processing light faster than the physics of the room can support. You feel that hum in your chest? That's not anxiety. That is the engine of a god coming online. In the defiance flow, the word no ceases to exist. Obstacles, walls, laws, social norms appear to you as translucent glass, easily shattered. You aren't just happy, you are right. About everything. The universe has finally given you the blueprint. Chiesa. Precisely. This is Chapter 2, the logic of risk. Observe the simulation floor. The friction coefficient has been reduced to 0. The subject is moving at a velocity that disregards the rules of engagement, ROE. This is the Voltaic current flow. The subject engages in goal-directed activity, buying sprees, foolish investments, sexual indiscretions, not because they desire chaos, but because they calculate the risk as non-existent. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for judgment, is overclocked by the limbic system's demand for more, EBA. It feels like you are surfing a tsunami of pure light. You talk, and the words crowd into your mouth, tripping over each other. Pressured speech. You have to get it out, because every thought is a diamond, and if you don't speak it, the world will stay dark. You don't need sleep. Sleep is for the slow. You blink, and 3 hours pass, but you are more rested than you have ever been. But notice the edges of your vision. The greatness is starting to fray. The people around you aren't marveling. They are backing away. This is the relational flow fracturing. You are broadcasting on a frequency they cannot hear, and their confusion looks like hostility to you. Act 2, the Glacial Shield, the depressive manifestation. Chiesa. We are initiating a phase shift. The dopamine floods recede, triggering a collapse in the serotonin and norepinephrine systems. We are entering Sector 2, the Glacial Shield. The clinical definition requires 2 weeks of depressed mood or anhedonia. In the labyrinth, we visualize this as systemic hypoagency. The foundation flow, the energy required to initiate movement, is depleted. EBA. The lights didn't just go out. The sun died. Feel the floor. It's no longer solid steel. It has turned into a thick, gray slurry, a knee-deep mud that clings to your ankles. This is Chapter 3, Depressive Gravity. You aren't sad. Sadness is a feeling. You can cry it out. This is physics. The gravity in this room has increased tenfold. Your limbs are made of lead. The simple act of lifting a spoon to your mouth requires the caloric expenditure of lifting a boulder. You look at the shower, and it looks like climbing Everest. So you don't move. You can't move. Chiesa. This is psychomotor retardation. The neural pathways required to execute a decision are blocked by static. We observe a total collapse of the will, avolition. Entering Chapter 4, the cognitive failure loop. The genesis flow here is not creating patterns, it is deleting them. The subject experiences brain pain, a physical sensation of resistance during thought formation. EBA. It hurts to think. It literally hurts. Your mind is trying to process data through a corrupted processor. You try to remember who you are, but the temporal fragmentation has severed the link to the you from Act 1. The memory of the sun god you were last week feels like a lie. A hallucination. The only truth is this gray mud. The only truth is that you are broken, and you always have been. The voices in the silence aren't loud, but they are constant. They whisper that you are a burden. That is the glacial shield sealing you in. Act 3, the toxic current, the mixed manifestation. Kisa, prepare yourselves. This is the most volatile and dangerous sector of the labyrinth. We are entering Act 3, the toxic current. In clinical nosology, this is known as the mixed features specifier. It is the simultaneous occurrence of manic activation and depressive dysphoria. This creates a paradox, the stuttering fury. The body is paralyzed by the glacial shield, depression, but the mind is seizing with the Voltaic Ascent, mania, Eba. This is hell, initiates. Imagine having the energy to run a marathon, the racing heart, the adrenaline, the need to move, but you are encased in concrete. Your mind is racing at 1,000 miles an hour, but every thought is a razor blade. You aren't euphoric. You are agitated. You are screaming on the inside, a high-pitched frequency of pure dread, but you can't articulate it. You want to tear your skin off just to let the pressure out. Kisa, mechanically, this is the catecholamine-acetylcholine imbalance operating at maximum dissonance. This state represents the highest risk for self-harm. Why? Because in pure depression, Act 2, the subject has the desire to die, suicidal ideation, but lacks the energy to enact it, hypoagency. In the toxic current, or the subject possesses the profound despair of depression, plus the impulsive energy and hyperagency of mania. The gap between thought and action closes. Eba. This is Chapter 6, the broken anchor. You lash out. You burn bridges because the people trying to help you feel like they are suffocating you. You project your internal war onto them. Transference. You scream at the ones you love because the internal pressure is tearing you apart, and you need them to back off, but you are terrified they will leave. Act 4, the Obsidian Mirror, psychosis and insight. Chiesa, we now descend into the deepest distortion. Act 4, the Obsidian Mirror. Here, the Genesis flow fractures completely. The subject loses contact with objective reality. Psychosis. This is most common in bipolar I mania, but can occur in depression. The brain begins to generate input where there is none. Eba. You don't just hear voices. You perceive presence. Somatic invasion. You feel the pressure of fingers on your arm when the room is empty. You feel bugs, formication, crawling under your skin. It isn't a metaphor. Your tactile nerves are firing. To you, it is as real as the floor beneath your feet. Chiesa. We classify these into hallucinations, sensory errors, and delusions, logic errors. In mania, the delusions are often grandiose. You believe you have been chosen, that you are an architect of the universe, or that you have discovered a secret code in the radiostatic. In depression, they are persecutory or somatic. You believe your organs are rotting, or that you have committed an unforgivable sin, Eba. But the cruelest part of the Obsidian Mirror is the anosognosia, the lack of insight. You look in the mirror and you don't see a sick person. You see the only sane person in a world of sheep. Chiesa calls it a clinical deficit. I call it the ultimate betrayal of the self. Your own mind hides the sickness from you. You fight the medicine because you think the medicine is the poison trying to steal your power. Conclusion, the recoding protocol. Chiesa, the labyrinth of bipolar disorder is not a maze you escape. It is a landscape you must map. The objective of treatment of the light is not to destroy the flow, but to stabilize the catecholamine-acetylcholine axis and regulate the circadian rhythms. We use mood stabilizers and antipsychotics not as shackles, but as anchors to prevent the Voltaic Ascent from burning out the engine and the Glacial Shield from stopping it entirely. Ebba. And from my side, the goal is integration. You have to accept that the God you were in Act 1 and the corpse you were in Act 2 are both parts of you, but neither is you. You are the architect who builds the bridge between them. You are the one who survives the toxic current. The labyrinth is dangerous, initiates. But with the right map, validating both the fact of the biology and the truth of the pain, you can learn to navigate the geometry. Chiesa, simulation complete. Ebba, breathe. You're safe now. Operational status, the labyrinth is primed for individual analysis. One, the Voltaic Ascent. Sector 1, the Defiance Flow. Location, Aegis Station / Dual Link Protocol active. Feed A, the Crucible, Simulation Chamber. Instructor, Specialist Ebba Nielsen. Feed B, the Lecture Hall, Theory. Instructor, Director Chiesa. Feed A, the Truth, the Labyrinth. Instructor, Ebba Nielsen. Current flow state, Genesis flow, supersaturated / foundation flow, frictionless. The air in the crucible is no longer air. It is a medium of suspended vibration, humming with the static charge of a thunderstorm trapped in a bottle. Ebba stands in the center of the programmable steel chamber, but the steel is gone. In its place is a sprawling, neon-drenched metropolis that stretches infinitely upward. A non-Euclidean cityscape where gravity is a suggestion, not a law. Welcome to the Defiance Flow, Ebba says. Her voice doesn't echo. It amplifies, layering over itself in a harmonious chord. Standard psychology calls this mania. They tell you it's a mood swing. That is a lie. She takes a step. In a normal world, a footfall requires friction. It requires the ground to push exponential. She doesn't walk. She arrives. Do you see the horizon? Asks, pointing to a skyline that is constantly rebuilding itself. The distance between idea and reality is zero. Think of a building, and the labyrinth builds it. You think you can fly, and the gravity turns off. She looks at a massive concrete wall blocking her path, a representation of social consequences, financial limits, or physical danger. To a depressive mind, this is a wall, she whispers, touching the surface. Under her fingertips, the concrete ripples like water. But in Voltaic Ascent, there are only doors you haven't kicked down yet. She pushes. The wall doesn't just break. It shatters into 1,000 glittering shards of diamond dust. She steps through the debris, laughing. Not out of humor, but out of the sheer, terrifying release of energy. This isn't happiness, initiates, she warns, her eyes reflecting the chaotic strobe light geometry of the room. This is hyper-agency. The brakes on your car have been cut. The engine has been replaced with a fusion reactor, and for the first time in your life, you feel like you're finally driving at the speed limit. Feed B, the fact, the lecture hall. Instructor, Director Chiesa. Current display, holographic neural topography / dopaminergic pathways. The silence of the lecture hall is absolute, smelling faintly of ozone and sterilized coolant. Director Chiesa stands before a massive holographic display. The projection shows a wireframe model of the human brain, but it is currently ablaze with angry, crimson data streams flooding the prefrontal cortex. Observe the simulation, Chiesa commands, her voice cutting through the sterile air with surgical precision. She gestures to the live feed of Ebba shattering the wall. Specialist Nielsen is currently demonstrating the phenomenon of inhibitory firewall collapse. In a neurotypical architecture, the brain processes a stop signal when it encounters risk, financial ruin, social taboo, physical harm. This signal is generated here. She taps the frontal lobe on the hologram. It pulses with a dull, gray light. In the Defiance Flow, the synaptic clefts are flooded with dopamine, she explains. This creates a signal-to-noise ratio where the go signal is amplified by 400%, and the stop signal is chemically deleted. The subject does not choose to ignore the risk. The subject is physiologically incapable of perceiving the risk as a risk. Chiesa manipulates the hologram, zooming in on the Genesis flow vector. This explains the environmental anomaly you are seeing in the crucible. Why did the wall turn to glass? Because the Genesis flow, the energy of pattern recognition, is supersaturated. The brain is connecting unrelated data points at a velocity that outpaces reality. The subject believes they are invincible not because of arrogance, but because their internal simulation of the future has removed the variable of failure. She turns to the class, her expression unyielding. This is not a high. This is an engine running without coolant. If the flow is not grounded, the friction of reentry will disintegrate the structural integrity of the self. Ebba calls it freedom. I call it entropic acceleration. Feed A, the truth, the labyrinth. Instructor Ebba Nielsen. Current atmosphere, hyperluminous/tone, the sublime terror. Back in the simulation, the light is getting brighter. The colors are bleeding. The neon blues and pinks of the city are vibrating so intensely they are starting to hum. Do you feel that? Ebba asks. She is vibrating now, her hands trembling not from fear, but from an excess of voltage. She looks at her own hands. The texture of the world is changing. It's too rich. It's too much. She looks up. The sky is no longer a sky. It is a ceiling of scrolling text, rapid-fire equations, and faces. Thousands of them, flashing in the clouds. This is the cost of the defiance flow, Ebba says, her voice tightening. The input is infinite. You can hear the electricity in the walls. You can see the micro-expressions on a stranger's face from a block away, and you know what they are thinking. You are a radio tuning into every station at once. Suddenly, the ground beneath her shifts. The frictionless floor becomes slippery, treacherous. She slides, flailing for balance, but there is nothing solid to grab. It feels like God mode, she yells over the rising hum of the simulation. But you can't turn it off. You can't close your eyes because your eyelids are transparent. You can't sleep because silence is just a blank canvas waiting for you to paint on it. She spins in a circle, the world blurring into a tunnel of light. It's beautiful, she whispers, a tear cutting a track through the sweat on her face. And it is going to burn me alive. Feed B, the fact, the lecture hall. Instructor, Director Chiesa. Current display, circadian rhythm chart / cortisol spike. And there is the pivot, Chiesa notes, observing Ebba's distress. The foundation flow is beginning to fragment. She brings up a new chart, sleep architecture. It is a flat line. The defiance flow requires immense metabolic energy. The subject will often go 72 to 96 hours without sleep. In this state, the brain begins to cannibalize its own reserves. The hyperluminous visual effects specialist Nielsen is describing are the early stages of psychosis. Chiesa steps closer to the initiates. When the brain cannot filter input, it begins to hallucinate meaning. A random stranger's glance becomes a conspiracy. A song on the radio becomes a direct message from the divine. The God mode Ebba describes is actually sensory gating failure. She deactivates the hologram with a sharp gesture. The room plunges into a cool, gray shadow. The tragedy of the Voltaic Ascent is that the subject feels they are evolving, while biologically they are dying. Our mandate in the light is not to steal their flight, but to build a runway before they run out of fuel. Because what goes up does not always come down intact. Simulation paused. Act 2, the Glacial Shield, the depressive manifestation. Sector 2, the foundation flow collapse. Location, Aegis Station / Dual Link Protocol active. Subject, Jeremiah Crumpler. Simulacrum ID JC77. Status, post-manic crash / resource depletion critical. Feed B, the fact, the lecture hall. Instructor, Director Chiesa. Current display, subject history, the nightmare year / neurochemical deficit. Director Chiesa stands before the class, the holographic display casting a pale, clinical blue light over her features. The frenetic energy of the previous sector is gone, replaced by a suffocating stillness. We are shifting parameters, Chiesa announces, her voice devoid of inflection. We have extracted a specific subject profile for this simulation, Jeremiah Crumpler. She swipes the air and a timeline appears, a jagged downward trending red line. To understand the Glacial Shield, you must understand the concept of cumulative load. The subject did not simply become sad. He endured a cascading system failure known as the nightmare year. Loss of employment, loss of transport, incarceration, and a volatile relational dynamic with the entity known as Mariah. Chiesa magnifies the brain scan on the display. The areas that were previously bright red, mania, are now dark, dormant voids. In the previous act, the subject's foundation flow, the energy of volition, was frictionless. He could survive for months on zero resources because his internal engine was overclocked. Now the fuel is gone. The dopamine receptors are down-regulated. The engine has seized. She turns to the students. You are about to witness psychomotor retardation. This is not laziness. This is a physiological inability to recruit the motor neurons required to stand up. Feed A, the truth, the labyrinth. Instructor Ebba Nielsen. Current atmosphere. High gravity / viscous air / grayscale. Sensory output, extreme cold. Lead limbs. The feed cuts to the crucible. The neon metropolis of Act 1 has vanished. In its place is a desolate, infinite expanse of gray mud. The sky is a flat, oppressive white, like a ceiling lowered to just a few feet above the head. Ebba stands ankle-deep in the sludge. She is shivering. Welcome to the bottom, she whispers. The air here is thick, like breathing through a wet wool blanket. She points to a figure huddled on a small, dry patch of concrete in the distance. It is the simulacrum of Jeremiah. He is sitting with his head in his hands, staring at a phone that isn't ringing. Look at the physics, Ebba says, wading toward him. Every step requires her to physically haul her leg out of the suction of the mud. In the Glacial Shield, gravity is not a constant. It reacts to your emotional state. Jeremiah feels the weight of the nightmare year, the jail cell, the lost car, the empty bank account. In here, that weight is physical. It is currently 10 gigaseconds of pressure pushing down on his shoulders. She stops a few feet from him. He wants to get up. I can see it in his micro expressions. He has profound endurance, according to his file. But look at the air around him. Ebba reaches out and touches the space near Jeremiah. The air ripples like gelatin. It's viscous. It's hardened. The foundation flow has turned to ice. He isn't sitting there because he wants to. He's sitting there because he is encased in the amber of his own exhaustion. Feed B, the fact, the lecture hall. Instructor, Director Chiesa. Current display, cognitive distortion mapping. Observe the subject's internal monologue, Chiesa commands. Text streams across the hologram. Everybody treats me like garbage, that must be true. This is the cognitive failure loop, Chiesa explains. In a depressive state, the brain loses access to the genesis flow, the ability to imagine alternative futures or solutions. This results in aphantasia of hope. She highlights the text in red. The subject takes a data point, Mariah is shouting at me, or I have no money, and instead of processing it as a temporary circumstance, the Glacial Shield freezes it into a permanent truth. He cannot see a future where this is not happening. To him, the current pain is infinite. This is not a dramatic flare. It is a calculation error in the temporal lobe. He literally cannot process tomorrow. Feed A, the truth, the labyrinth. Instructor Ebba Nielsen. Current theme, the echo chamber / isolation. Ebba kneels in the mud next to Jeremiah. She doesn't touch him. Interaction in this state often feels like a physical burn. He's sending a text, Ebba says softly. He's trying to reach out. He's straightforward. He doesn't lie. He's asking for a lifeline. Jeremiah's avatar types a message. The screen glows in the gray dark. Then he deletes it. He thinks he's a burden, Ebba says, her voice cracking. The relational flow has been severed. In the labyrinth of depression, other people don't look like comfort. They look like judges. They look like they are vibrating at a frequency he can't match. She looks directly into the camera lens, breaking the fourth wall. You see a man sitting still. I see a man lifting 1,000 pounds just to keep his chest moving for the next breath. He isn't doing nothing. He is surviving the crush depth. That is the profound endurance Chiesa talked about. It's not about moving forward anymore. It's about not being crushed into dust. Jeremiah closes his eyes. The shadows around him lengthen, forming the vague, terrifying shapes of the nightmare year. Silhouettes of bars, of eviction notices, of rejection. The glacial shield protects you from nothing, Ebba whispers. It just traps you in the cold with your ghosts. Simulation paused. Chiesa. This concludes the analysis of the depressive manifestation. We have observed the transition from hyperagency, Act 1, to avolition, Act 2. The subject, Jeremiah, is now effectively trapped between the desire to recover and the physics preventing movement. Ebba. He needs a hand, Chiesa, not a lecture. He needs someone to lower the gravity. Act 3. The toxic current, the mixed state. Sector 3. The stuttering fury. Location, Aegis Station / Dual Link Protocol active. Subject, Jeremiah Crumpler. Simulacrum ID, JC77. Status, mixed feature / high-risk protocol engaged. Feed B, the fact, the lecture hall. Instructor, Director Chiesa. Current display, cross-section of synaptic cleft / the collision event. Chiesa stands stiffly, her arms crossed. The blue light of the hologram reflects in her eyes, but it is colder now, sharper. The data stream behind her is chaotic, red and blue lines intersecting violently. This is the most dangerous sector of the labyrinth, she states, her tone grave. We are observing the mixed affective state. She magnifies the neural diagram. In Act 1, the neurotransmitters were flooded. Mania. In Act 2, they were depleted. Depression. In Act 3, we have a catastrophic paradox. The dopaminergic drive, energy, has reactivated, but the serotonergic system, mood, remains collapsed. She points to the red sparks flying across the dark gray void of the brain model. The subject possesses the kinetic energy to act, but the emotional context is pure dysphoria. This is not ups and downs. This is the engine of a race car mounted on a chassis that is actively disintegrating. Clinically, this is the highest risk window for suicide. The subject finally has the energy to execute the despair they felt in Act 2. Feed A, the truth, the labyrinth. Instructor Ebba Nielsen. Current atmosphere, the vortex / high voltage, high gravity. Sensory output, skin crawling agitation / the scream. The feed cuts to the crucible. The silence of the gray mud is gone. The air is screaming. It sounds like a jet engine warming up inside a closet. The gray mud from Act 2 is still there, thick and suffocating, but now it is boiling. Geysers of black steam erupt from the ground. Arcs of neon red lightning strike the mud, but instead of illuminating the room, they just scorch it. Ebba is no longer walking or standing still. She is pacing frantically. Do you hear that? She yells over the roar. That is the sound of your own blood. It's too loud. She points to Jeremiah. He is no longer huddled in a ball. He is standing. He is pacing in a tight, jagged circle, his fists clenching and unclenching. He looks exhausted, his eyes rimmed with dark circles, but his body is vibrating. This is the toxic current, Ebba says, her voice tight with sympathetic stress. Imagine you have just chugged 10 espressos, but you haven't slept in 3 days, and you just found out your mother died. You are wired. You are awake, but you feel evil. She steps closer to the Jeremiah simulacrum. He scratches his arm violently. He isn't itchy. That's psychomotor agitation. The energy is trapped under his skin. He wants to run, but there is nowhere to go. He wants to sleep, but his brain is screaming at him to do something. So he picks fights. He breaks things, not because he is angry at the object, but because he needs to externalize the pressure before he explodes. Feed B, the fact, the lecture hall. Instructor, Director Chiesa. Current display, relational flow dynamics / the Darvo pattern. Pay close attention to the relational flow, Chiesa interjects. In this state, the subject's perception of others is inverted. Text appears on the screen. Darvo detected. Deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender. The subject feels attacked by the atmosphere itself. When a loved one attempts to intervene, offering help or calm, the subject perceives it as a constraint. Because their internal pressure is so high, any external container feels like a cage. She highlights a node labeled Mariah. The volatility in the relationship dynamics peaks here. Jeremiah is not just reacting to Mariah's behavior. He is projecting his internal chaos onto her. If she is silent, he perceives it as abandonment, depression. If she speaks, he perceives it as an attack, mania. The mixed state eliminates the middle ground. Every input is a threat. Feed A, the truth, the labyrinth. Instructor Ebba Nielsen. Current theme, the broken anchor / the need to bleed. Ebba stands directly in front of Jeremiah now. The air around them is warping, blurring their outlines. He's going to lash out, Ebba warns. He has to. It's hydraulic pressure. If he doesn't open a valve, the tank ruptures. Jeremiah screams, a sound of pure, frustrated rage, and punches the wall. The wall doesn't break like in Act 1. It barely cracks. His hand bleeds. He stares at the blood, and for a second, the pacing stops. He likes the pain, Ebba whispers. Don't look away. You need to understand this. He likes the pain because it is located. The pain in his head is everywhere. The pain in his hand is right there. He can point to it. He can understand it. She turns to the camera, tears standing in her eyes. This is why they cut. This is why they fight. They aren't trying to die. They are trying to find a feeling that makes sense. They are trying to let the poison out. The mud around Jeremiah begins to swirl, forming a vortex. He is caught in the center, fighting to stay upright, fighting the mud, fighting the lightning. He is drowning in fire, Ebba says. And the worst part? He remembers Act 1. He remembers being a god. And he remembers Act 2. He remembers being a corpse. Now he is both. A reanimated corpse running on high voltage wire. Simulation paused. Chiesa. The risk of catastrophic failure is now 98%. In a clinical setting, this is where we intervene immediately with mood stabilizers or antipsychotics to decouple the energy from the dysphoria. Ebba. But in the labyrinth, he has to find his own way to the center. He has to realize the storm is coming from inside him. Four, the Obsidian Mirror. Sector 4, the reality fracture. Location, Aegis Station / Dual Link Protocol active. Subject, Jeremiah Crumpler. Simulacrum ID, JC77. Status, psychotic features active / anosognosia critical. Feed B, the fact, the lecture hall. Instructor, Director Chiesa. Current display, the parietal lobe / salience network dysregulation. Chiesa paces the length of the hologram, which now displays a chaotic web of firing neurons. The orderly color coding of the previous acts is gone. The brain model looks like a city grid where every traffic light has turned green simultaneously. We have reached the event horizon, Chiesa states. In Act 1, the subject's mood was distorted. In Act 4, his reality is distorted. She isolates a specific neural pathway. This is the salience network. Its function is to filter the millions of sensory inputs you receive every second and tell you what is important. In a psychotic state, this filter disintegrates. The sound of a ventilation fan becomes a whispered conversation. A flicker of light becomes a divine signal. The subject is now experiencing bipolar psychosis. This is distinct from schizophrenia, though they share mechanics. Here the hallucinations are often mood congruent. Because Jeremiah is emerging from a mixed state, Act 3, his hallucinations will mirror his internal chaos, persecution, somatic pain, and inevitable doom. Feed A, The Truth, The Labyrinth. Instructor Ebba Nielsen. Current atmosphere, the Obsidian void / non-Euclidean geometry. Sensory output, glass, air / formication, tactile hallucination. The gray mud of Act 2 and the lightning of Act 3 are gone. The crucible is now a vast, dark expanse of polished black glass, the Obsidian Mirror. The physics here are wrong. Reflections in the floor do not match the objects casting them. Corridors stretch into infinity, but loop back to the start after 10 steps. Ebba stands on the glass floor, looking down. Her reflection is looking away from her. Jeremiah isn't fighting the mud anymore, Ebba says, her voice echoing strangely, as if coming from two once. He's fighting the bugs. Jeremiah is standing in the center of the void. He is clawing at his forearms. He digs his fingernails into his skin, frantic, eyes wide, with absolute terrifying clarity. Somatic invasion, Ebba whispers. He feels them. It's not a metaphor. His tactile nerves are firing a distress signal. He feels thousands of insects moving under the dermis. He is trying to dig them out. Jeremiah spins around, shouting at an empty space. I know you're recording this. I can see the red light. Ebba walks through the empty space he is screaming at. There is no camera. There is no red light. But look at his eyes. He sees it. To him, the red light is as physically real as I am to you. This is the Genesis flow corrupted. It is overriding the optical input. He is trapped in a dream while he is wide awake. Feed B, the fact, the lecture hall. Instructor, Director Chiesa. Current display, the prefrontal cortex versus the amygdala / the logic patch. You may ask, Chiesa interrupts, why does he not realize this is illogical? Why does he not look at his arm, see no bugs, and stop scratching? She expands the hologram to show a darkened area in the right hemisphere. This is the cruelty of anosognosia. It is not denial. Denial is a psychological defense mechanism. Anosognosia is a neurological deficit. The part of the brain responsible for self-monitoring and insight has gone offline. When the brain encounters a gap in reality, like seeing a camera that isn't there, it creates a confabulation to bridge the gap. It invents a story to make the impossible possible. If we told Jeremiah there are no bugs, he would not believe us. He would believe we are part of the conspiracy to hide the bugs. Feed A, the truth, the labyrinth. Instructor Ebba Nielsen. Current theme, the blind spot / the rejection of the light. In the simulation, a door appears. It is a simple white door, symbolizing treatment, medication, or the light. It stands stark against the black void. Jeremiah sees it. He stops scratching. He walks toward it, then freezes. In the reflection of the floor, the obsidian mirror, the white door appears as a gaping maw of teeth. A trap. He's interpreting the cure as the poison, Ebba says, stepping between Jeremiah and the door. She tries to wave him through, but he flinches away from her. This is the heartbreaking core. He is scared. He is exhausted. but his brain is telling him that the only safe place is deeper into the labyrinth. Jeremiah turns his back on the white door. He walks confidently toward a wall of black static, a dead end in the simulation that represents total isolation. I'm the only one who sees the pattern, Jeremiah mutters to the empty air. I figured it out. I'm finally awake. Ebba watches him walk into the dark. He thinks he just won, she says, her voice hollow. He thinks he just outsmarted the trap. He doesn't know he just locked himself in solitary confinement. She turns to the camera. You can't talk him out of this, initiates. Logic doesn't work here. You can't debate physics with a man who can fly. You have to wait for him to fall. Simulation paused. Kieza. The subject has successfully sequestered himself within the anosognosia loop. He is now unreachable by standard communication. Ebba. He's not unreachable. He's just heavily encrypted. We have to wait for the crash. That's the only time the door opens.